If you thought this was going to be a normal Blender tutorial, I need you to think again, because today we are doing a meme video, which I haven't done in a while. You guys know those energy memes, like when something is good or even better or perfect or excellent or whatever you want to use that format on, you have this kind of guru spiritual thing going on. I want to make one of those renders, but make it as extreme as possible. So let's make one. Okay, so I'm in Blender 3.6, but I don't think there's much I can do with like the default primitive, so we're gonna need to download some models. We're gonna look up some normal stuff like human man model 3D free. Hopefully this finds what I want it to. I kinda like this one. It's a bit cursed from the get-go. This is gonna serve us well. Okay, so yes, he did make it available to download. Thank you, FunHunter98. And while we're here, I should probably also get a model of a brain that seems to be like standard in all of these. So I actually like the look of this one. It's quite detailed. I don't know if I'm gonna keep the texture. Okay, we're done with that. There are our files, and I think we are good to go. Let's see how creative we can get in here. Okay, so I'm gonna start by deleting everything, and I think the first thing is to bring in the person, and we're gonna rig him and do all sorts of things. Character.obj. You are a tall fucker, aren't you? Okay, so we have this like default model, but I don't like the pose that he's in by default. It kind of seems, you know, pretty boring to me. So to change the pose, I don't think this thing came rigged. It did not. We're gonna have to rig it ourselves. Before doing that, I think having less geometry here is always a good thing. So I'm gonna decimate and use a 0.1 ratio, although that looks a bit unsubdivided. Let's do 0.2, and now our model is less geometric. Well, it's geometric, it's just less polygons. To reposition this, the way I like to do it without sculpting, if I could find it, is using an armature. So I'm basically gonna make a basic rig for this, not so that I can animate, but so I can like reposition. So just put the bones where the bones belong. This doesn't need to be anatomically accurate. In fact, I think it's better if it's not anatomically accurate. You know, it isn't a beautiful job, but I think it's gonna get the job done. So it's good enough for me. Take the mesh, take the armature, Control P? Control P to do a automatic weight parent, and now the idea is we should be able, yes, we can animate our man. Beautiful. Now, when I was thinking about this, oh no, that is cursed. When I was thinking about this, I did have an idea for what this should look like. I kind of want this guy like bringing his arms up and his head is gonna be huge, as if he's kind of like worshiping his brain, is what we're going for. So you can see how it kind of looks like he's worshiping is the idea. Look at that. Okay, so maybe an easy way to do this is I just select the bottom, which, I don't know, this doesn't feel like the way to do it, but whatever. I'll bend it like this, and then with both objects, I can then rotate them. So it looks like he's kneeling. But you can, or not kneeling, I mean like squatting. I think that's actually what we want. I didn't think we would get there. But minus a bit of like funky geometry, I think I like this. Believe me when I say this, this wasn't exactly what I was picturing. But that doesn't mean we can't make it work. No, that's a bit too alien. Scale it back down. Okay, so now we got the thing that I'm looking for. Perfect. And now you're thinking, what was your idea, CGMatter? What was your idea? What is he like praising up here? Well, remember, we downloaded 2 models, so of course I'm gonna put the brain there. And maybe, I don't know, I think this is basically gonna end up depending on camera angles. So maybe it's a good idea to actually pick what that is now. But I think what's gonna make this look like ridiculous is taking our focal length and bringing that down a lot. And that makes it zoomed out, but if we now go in a bit more, that's how we get the look we're going for. And a bit of an aspect ratio change. So it's like a 1:1 image. And in rendered view, this does come with a texture, which I don't want, so I'm gonna take this and just kind of get rid of it. And I remember an effect that I learned from Ducky a very, very long time ago, is you can take your emission, and I'm just gonna pick a very like powerful, like purpley color. If you take the Fresnel and use this as a mask, so Fresnel basically gonna give us this nice like outline of the mesh, which means if we use this as an emission strength or an emission mask, it should look, yeah, it's gonna look very spiritual. And if we take the background color and make that perfectly black, we now have a canvas on which we can work. And just using the color purple seems pretty boring. I think a good way to get random color, or semi-random from the get-go, is using texture coordinates. You can see we have these nice generated coordinates. or maybe normal coordinates. These each come with their own nice color scheme. And you can literally take this and connect it to the emission to get the color. Turns out when I bring down the transparency, there are some apparent weird things in this mesh, and then I can take these, join them together as a single object. And I think, and I'm not just saying that because of the brain, but I think I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, this is a good start, but it kind of looks pretty lame. And I agree with you, but in the back of my head, I know that compositing is going to take this up a notch. Actually, before we do that, I've decided, executive decision, we don't need this background layer. I hyped it up, we don't need it. In our compositing, you can see how we're starting off. And there's some very basic things we can do to make this more ridiculous. The first one, these are all kind of the effects that if you go too far, make your image look baked, which is what we're going for. The first of these is lens distortion. So as you increase dispersion and the distort, you can see it's making it super like colorful or kind of like chromatic aberration-y. I want to keep this powerful yet a bit tasteful. Okay, so that's a good start, but what can we do to make this really pop? Well, one of the kind of cursed nodes is sunbeams, and basically what sunbeams does is you give it an input, and then as we increase the ray length, you can see it kind of creates these god rays, which is definitely one of the effects we're going for. So I'm just gonna mix this on top. Yes, okay, that is a major improvement. So this is before, this is after, and we can play with the ray length and also kind of the intensity of this, and also like what direction this is coming from. So maybe I want this to kind of like ascend a little. The light is coming upwards towards the brain. I think I actually like that quite a bit. Now, the next node that I feel like is very obvious is we want this to glow. So I'm gonna take a glare node, but we gotta make sure that our threshold is somewhat low so that things are actually getting a glare. And one of the more intense one of these is not streaks, but it's ghosts, which kinda can be too much. Kinda creates this like lens flare effect. Obvious color correction is to kinda crisp this up with some saturation, but maybe not too much so we get like fully baked colors. And from this point on, yes, we could add more compositing, but I think actually doing something in our scene is going to kind of take this up a notch. We definitely want to change the background because the background is pretty plain, it's just black. And there's this node that I basically never use, but maybe this is a good use case. It's the magic texture, and you can see it kind of creates this crazy psychedelic effect, which in this case is what we want. So I think the higher the depth, kind of the more bright this is, it seems. And I think what I don't like about this actually is I like the pattern, but what it's doing is it's actually brightening up our model. So you can see whereas before we had all this glow, now it's kind of like, I don't know, it's overshadowed, but in the brightness sense. A little hack for that is using the light path node, and we can kind of mix these together using, I think it's the camera ray node. I think it's working. See, this is the glow we have, and when we add the background back in, it almost just looks like we put it underneath, and it's not like affecting anything. And I know the way to do this. Ooh, you know what? I did not expect this to happen, but it does look kind of dope. Maybe this is the way to go. What happens if we connect a noise texture? Find like a nice balance of these two that isn't like overwhelming. And maybe this is the way to go, actually. Let's do another render. So we are definitely getting somewhere. That is for sure. The only thing I don't like is, yes, it's colorful, which is good, but it's almost like getting to the point where you can't really understand what's going on, and not in a funny meme way, just in a bad composition kind of way. Take our magic texture and basically constrain it to two colors. Mainly, I'm going for kind of this like synthwave vibe of like purple and maybe blue. Maybe a color scheme like that. Okay, I actually like this, and I think one more thing we can do to the world, just a final little touch, is maybe adding like stars that are happening. Basic little trick, use Voronoi texture, which you can see is creating all these dots, especially if we bring up the scale. You could kind of pinch this down to create all these like little stars, which I think is pretty cool. Yeah, you can see we're kind of getting these star-like shapes. It's a little hard to tell, but they're definitely there. Yes, on every render, we stray further from God's light. So I want there to be some energy emanating from it, you know? Call me crazy. I'm going to basically distribute a bunch of points on the surface of this and have those kind of shoot out. If we now instance on these, some like lines that are shooting out, just use a instance on point node, and then all we really need is, I guess, a curve line would be better for what we're trying to do. You can see we have kind of this hairy looking thing, but you want to take the rotation, connect it to the rotation, and now they're kind of pointed outwards. And you can see when we increase the length of these, voila. It's not looking great, but it is kind of what I'm going for. Okay, so I think I figured it out. I don't think any of these should intersect. And basically, here's how it works. We have a ray cast node that is casting out rays from the points, and it's gonna self-reference this mesh. So basically what we're saying is if this is a hit, in other words, if the ray is hitting another part of the mesh, we are going to delete that point. And basically, doesn't matter the specifics. Basically what this is going to do is it's going to get rid of the excess rays. And now all we need to do is kind of give these things thickness. And just to add some visual interest, what I want to do is I also want to kind of distort these. And then this is also something we can smooth out by using a fillet curve. By default, these lines shouldn't really have much of a material going on, but if I apply the same material we've been using, yes, now we can have some like rays shooting out of here. So I think I'm pretty happy with this. There's definitely a lot more we can do here, but I think this is a good start. I'm gonna distort this in the other direction actually, so it's kind of like zooming out, and this will kind of make it look like there's more power emanating from here. I'm also gonna take the glare and essentially make it a bit more intense so it's actually brightening up the image. I think there's one pretty trippy effect we can add without too much work. It's just adding a displace. And if we can actually displace the image by itself with a large strength, it's going to add this kind of like liquefying effect to it. What I want to do is I want to take this and add it on top. And I bring down the factor by quite a bit. It kind of looks like not much changed, but here's the before and here's the after. So box sharpen definitely makes this look baked. What about diamond sharpen? A little less so. Laplace. I found that just using a bit of Laplace does darken the image, but I think it gives it some nice contrast that it didn't have before. I was playing around with the dilate and erode, and I think we can just add a bit more extra here. And after playing around with some settings, I think I'm happy with this. It does darken the image, but it does like, I don't know, I think it adds something to it. And now, to top everything off, I swear this is gonna be the last thing, I'm gonna add a final glare, which is basically just gonna use a fog glow, but if I bring down the threshold and bring up the size, I can just add a touch of this glare just to add like a final like blurring glow. There we go, the final image. I don't know what the process was to get here, but we did it. So anyways, thanks for watching this tutorial, and if for some, I don't know why, but if you want the Patreon file for this so you can play around with it yourself, or you just want to support what I do, there's a link in the description to Patreon. So this was a tutorial, no doubt about that.